I started out here in Montgomery County over 11 years ago as an assistant district attorney, and I worked at the DA's office for 3 years. And during that time period, I stood up in front of thousands of Montgomery County jurors. And what I learned very quickly is that we are a group of conservative, fair-minded, and compassionate people. And I want to bring that sensibility to the Ninth District Court. After working at the district attorney's office for 3 years, I started my own law practice. And in the almost 8.5 years that I have been practicing law, I have handled primarily criminal cases in adult and juvenile realm, and I've also handled some family and civil cases. During my time, I have represented clients in 14 counties in the state of Texas, in the Court of Appeals, and in the Court of Criminal Appeals. And I plan to bring that experience to the bench in the Ninth District Court. I'll use that experience in other counties and my extensive experience in Montgomery County to implement some new procedures that will increase the efficiency of the court. I will also use that experience representing clients both as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer to make sure that I am fair and impartial in all cases. And my experience on both sides of the aisle brings with it a unique perspective from my opponents. I am also the only candidate in this race who has represented clients in criminal, civil, family, and juvenile cases. And the Ninth District Court is a court of general jurisdiction. It is possible that it could hear family, juvenile, and civil cases in the future, and so we certainly want for our judge to represent or to reflect the ability to sit competently on all of those cases. But because my primary experience in the last year has been mostly criminal law, I'm certainly competent to hear criminal cases at all levels as well. I'm asking for your vote on March 1st because I am the most qualified candidate. My experience between my opponents is unique, and it makes me ideally suited for the Ninth District Court. Please help me bring that sensibility of fairness, of independence, and of a consistent and efficient application of the law, and help me do the best that I can for Montgomery County. Thank you.
Mr. Grant.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phil Grant. I'm currently your first assistant district attorney working for your district attorney, Brett Ligon. I have been a criminal practitioner now for almost 20 years. I have the most experience of any of the candidates in this race in criminal law. In fact, I've had the opportunity to take and pass the test that allows me to say I'm board certified in criminal law. And to tell you a little bit about board certification, you get board certified when you're recommended by your peers, by the judges you practiced in front of, and by defense attorneys you practiced against. And they say that you have obtained a level of expertise that is above your peers. There's only about 10% of lawyers in the state of Texas that have obtained a board certification. And I'm one of the few, 20 or so here in Montgomery County, that have obtained that board certification in criminal law, showing you, the voter, that I have that extra level of expertise in this field. And that's important because the Ninth District Court is a full-time felony criminal court. Yes, it's a court of general jurisdiction and it could hear other cases. And I've handled civil cases before, and I've handled other types of law before, so I'm prepared to assist the other judges as necessary in any of those types of cases. But you need to know, as a citizen of Montgomery County, that God forbid something happened to your family, or one of your family members is charged with a crime, that the person who's on the bench of the Ninth District Court has a steady hand, no matter the seriousness of the offense. As a prosecutor for the last 20 years, I've tried more serious cases as I moved along in the chain. I've tried serious cases like capital murder. I tried one of the oldest cold cases that has ever been tried in the state of Texas and obtained a conviction for capital murder just a few years ago here in a Montgomery County courtroom. I've tried capital murders where the victim was a 3-year-old child, and I had to go to that autopsy, and I had to follow that case all the way through to where the judge sentenced that defendant to life as well. So I've handled the most serious types of offenses, and I've done so representing you, the state of Texas. Now, I've also been involved in this community. I'm not somebody who just gets involved in public service projects because I'm running for political office. I've been president of the board of Children's Safe Harbor, which is an organization in this county that helps kids that have been sexually abused. I've been president of the board of the Greater Houston Athletic Association for the physically disabled. I also serve on the board of directors of the Conroe and Lions Club. And I've taught Bible studies, and I've led Sunday school at the church, Fellowship of Montgomery, where I attend and where my wife is on staff. So I'm involved in those community service aspects as well, which I think is an important consideration for y'all in determining whether or not you have somebody that's really invested in this community or whether somebody that's just looking for a title. So ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm the most qualified and experienced. I'm also the most dedicated to public service in this community, and I'm asking for your vote for the 9th District Court. Thank you very much.
Mr. Yalek?
My name is Eric Yalek, and there are, I think, 3 issues or 3 things that distinguish me from my opponents. But I want to be clear, I really like them both, and I have a lot of respect for both of them. First of all is experience, and it's experience in 2 regards, both longevity and, second of all, reform. I've been a practicing attorney now for 27 years, longer than almost the 2 of my opponents. My opponents have practiced law combined. I've been board certified since either of them were licensed. I've been board certified for now over 20 years as an attorney. And I've lived in this community for 24 years. My wife Tamara, who's in the audience tonight, actually has lived here for about 38 years in this community. She went to high school at McCullough High School. I think that experience is important, and one of the areas where I think that you will find that I have experience is in reform of government, and there is no question our courthouse seriously needs some reform. I was appointed and then elected to the Montgomery County Hospital District, some of you all may recall, between 2003 and 2006, and basically I ran through the hospital district. We cut expenses by more than 22%. We cut the tax rate so that it was the lowest tax rate in the history of the hospital district by August of 2006. And right after we passed that budget, I felt like my work was done and I resigned from the board and moved on with the rest of my life. Now there's a second distinction in this race, and that is independence. You want a judge who is independent, who will follow the law, who won't create the law, who isn't beholden to special interests. I made a decision in this campaign. I'm not accepting contributions. This is an entirely self-funded campaign. The campaign is, we have spending limits. I have funded this campaign to the full amount of the spending limits, but I'm not going to accept donations, particularly from practicing attorneys, bail bondsmen, who are a very distinct special interest groups, and also from even law enforcement, who I'm very sympathetic to in many ways, but they come before the court, and I want people to feel like they're going to get a fair shake in the courtroom. Finally, I do have a little bit of a different perspective from both Mr. Grant and Ms. Bim. I have not been in the criminal industry in any way. I'm very familiar with the Code of Criminal Procedure, and I've already offered some reforms that I think will save the taxpayers a lot of money in this county. I ask for you to vote for me on March 1st in the Republican primary. I want to bring justice and not politics to the courtrooms of Montgomery County. Thanks.
Thank you. If you did not get a chance to put your name on one of these slips so you can ask questions at any time, you may go back to the table, and when they get a few, they will bring them up and we will put them in. Okay, you have it. Okay, our first questioner will be Chuck Sheldon. And then, Chuck, you here?
I'm right here.
Okay. You'll come up to the middle and get the microphone. And if Larry Rogers will be in waiting, so as soon as Chuck's done and getting the answers from all 3 of the candidates, if you'll be ready with your question. 1 minute.
My question is about saving money. You mentioned saving money. I'd like all of you to address how you would save the taxpayers' money.
Sure, I think I go first on this one.
Yes.
I was afraid you were going to ask me something about the commissioner race. Which which I don't know anything about. Now, how am I going to save the county money? Well, obviously something that's been in the news a lot over the last couple months is the fact that our jail is woefully overcrowded. And I think the number one reason our jail is overcrowded, frankly, is because of the judicial work ethic that some of our judges have displayed. Now, for example, over here on the row is Judge Mychalk. And I'm going to tell you, her work ethic and her record is exemplary when it comes to working hard and being available. She not only works hard 8 to 5, but she's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when law enforcement needs a search warrant or something like that. But the way that makes the biggest impact to you, the taxpayer, is because she tries a lot of cases and she works hard and she has a lot of dockets and she resolves cases. She has the lowest percentage of people in the jail right now. And the cases, she has the youngest age of case, and her cases work out the quickest. The exact opposite of what's going on in the ninth today. So if I just match the efficiency that Judge Mychalk has shown that you can do in a full-time felony criminal court like the 9th District Court, then we're going to cut the jail population by a couple hundred. And at $50 a day, that's a tremendous amount for the taxpayer. We're talking millions of dollars. And the second way we're going to save the taxpayer money is we're going to look at who we're appointing lawyers to. Right now, there's really not any checks and balances on who gets appointed a lawyer. If they say they're indigent, we appoint them a lawyer. Well, in Waco, they hired an investigator to investigate folks that said they were indigent. And they found about 40% of the people that were appointed lawyers really weren't indigent. Well, I don't know about you, but if somebody can pay their own way in the criminal justice system, they should pay their own way. I'm 100% in favor of appointing lawyers to people that can't afford it. But the people that can afford it, ladies and gentlemen, need to pay for it. And we spent several $1 million on criminal defense over the last couple of years. So we can save a lot of money that way too. Thank you.
Mr. Yalek, you'll be next.
There are several ways that I would try to save money. First of all, there's no question that the 9th District Court needs a working judge who works more than about 1.5 to 2 days a week. I have made it very clear that I will work 10 hours a day on the bench from 8 to 6, that I will try jury trials at least once a week, but basically for a full 40-hour week, and that I will be a working judge and I will move cases. And I'm not going to grant continuance after continuance in criminal cases, which is one of the reasons that we do have jail overcrowding. I forgot when it was about 10 days ago, I made a proposal that I will issue a standing order the first day that I'm sworn in office. It will require that the district clerk and the district attorney's office and a few other administrative personnel will need to start submitting penitentiary packets to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice within 72 hours of every judgment of conviction. By doing that, we will save about $2.5 million a year for the taxpayers of this county on the cost of the jail. Right now, between 18 and 22% of the inmates in our jail are so-called waiting for papers, and that's those penitentiary packets. We need to move those people into the state prison system and not be bearing the cost of housing those people. There also are other ways that we can save money, but there's no question. If you just have a hard working judge who moves the docket, that will have an enormous impact on what the taxpayers have to bear from our court system.
I think it's important that we recognize that one of the reasons why we have an overcrowded jail is because our jail was built in 1987 when the population of Montgomery County was roughly 169,000 people. Now we have a population of over 500,000 people, but we have the same size jail. And so it's not just because of judicial inefficiency that our jail is overcrowded. Part of it has to do with the population explosion of Montgomery County. That being said, judicial efficiency can certainly assist in reducing the costs of housing inmates at the jail. I would support a program for house arrest or ankle monitors for non-violent, low-level offenders rather than serving jail time, or in order to facilitate them being released on bonds. I think it's critical that judges revisit our bond schedule so that nonviolent, low-level offenders are not held on bonds for long periods of time. And part of that is having frequent dockets and providing lawyers with an opportunity to have access with the judge so that if a bond is appropriately set, they can address it very quickly with the judge. I think that also requires that the judge actually take the initiative to review all of the bonds that are set on the cases in that court to ensure that they are in line with what is appropriate for the case. The other thing that I would recommend is that the court does have to take an active interest in managing its docket to ensure that cases are working their way through the system properly. And I will give some of our judges credit for doing that. That's part of what I mean when I say that I want to bring personal responsibility and accountability to this bench. Both the state and the defense have to be held accountable for their actions and be held responsible for moving their cases through the system. And consistent and firm rulings and holding the parties accountable for doing their business before they come to court is a critical part of that.
Mr. Rogers, your question? Yeah. And the next person in line will be Mike Hawley. 1 minute.
1 minute. As I have thought about if I was running to be a judge, I was thinking about if I was a prosecutor, what would keep me from leaning more to a prosecution side? If I was from civil, how would I be, if I had more experience in civil, how would I be right straight down the line? So that's my question to each of you. How will you make a decision and not let your past experiences, in whichever side of the law you represent, how will you do that?
Mr. Yalek, if you'll begin.
You know, first of all, you've got to judge the person. You can't just stereotype someone and say, well, you know, they're a criminal prosecutor, so they're going to be pro-prosecutor. You need to look at what is motivating them to run for office. You need to look at what their experiences have been in their career. So it's not just a straightforward question. What I think you can look at least from the perspective of Eric Yalek, is I want to be independent. I want to follow the law. I've been a constitutional conservative basically my whole life. I've been a Republican activist since I was 15 years old in 1976. I've worked very hard for conservative causes and for the Republican Party. And I am making very clear that I will bring an independent perspective to the bench. I'm not going to be pro-prosecution. I'm not going to be pro-defense. I believe that people should be treated well when they come into a courtroom. Coming into a courtroom is a very stressful experience for everyone, including attorneys even. There's no reason the judge needs to be a jerk, and there's no reason that the judge should not treat people with dignity. But the reality is that what a judge should do is a judge should represent the conscience of the citizens of this county, and that's why it's important that I think I've lived here a long time and had a lot of experience in our community. But also, a judge needs to follow the law. And so one thing you need to evaluate is this a person who, number one, has a penchant for following the law, and number two, is this a person who has knowledge of the Code of Criminal Procedure, the Penal Code, the Rules of Civil Procedure, and the Texas Family Code. But, you know, you do need to look at people's attitudes and what their backgrounds are. And quite frankly, I think that that is a big issue in this race.
Ms. Bean, you'd be next.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I bring a unique perspective to this race because I am the only candidate who has been both a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. As a defense lawyer, however, I know that there has been some criticism of the current judge of the 9th District Court that he didn't seem to leave his defense lawyer position behind when he took the bench. And I certainly understand that. And one of the things about being a defense lawyer that you recognize is that sometimes your clients deserve exactly what they get. And your role as a defense lawyer is not to represent people for the purpose of getting them out of what they have done. Your role as a defense lawyer is to ensure that they receive a fair trial and that they are treated fairly by the system and that they have an opportunity to be heard. And that certainly comports with what the court does as well. But as a former prosecutor, I also know, and having practiced civil and family, that every person who is in the courtroom has a role to play. And part of being fair and impartial is giving them an opportunity to play that role. And our system is at its most efficient when everyone who walks into the courtroom believes that they will be treated fairly by the court. Because when they believe that they will be treated fairly by the court, then they don't demand what is the most inefficient part of our court system, which is a jury trial. And so that's another thing that I bring to this bench, is because I have operated in all of the areas of law that this court can hear, but also because I am well respected by both the defense bar and the district attorney's office. I believe that the parties in criminal cases will trust that I will do the right thing and that I will stand up for and defend the law, which is what judges are sworn to do. And my promise to you as voters is that when I am elected, I will be fair and impartial, and that will be reflected in my rulings, as will my commitment to the conservative principles of personal responsibility and accountability. Thank you.
Mr. Grant.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've been a prosecutor for 20 years, and I understand that might give some people some pause. How is this guy going to be fair? How is this guy going to be impartial? And I would say, ladies and gentlemen, that one of the ways you become a good prosecutor, in fact, I think the main way you become a good prosecutor is by being fair and open-minded. If you're closed-minded and you don't listen to the people that are involved in criminal cases and you don't evaluate both sides of the case effectively, then you're never going to be successful as a prosecutor, because in reality we have to plea bargain about 98% of our cases. And that's a lot. And you have to do that by being reasonable, right? And that means you made an agreement with the defense attorney, and it's an agreement that the judge thinks is fair. So you have to come to the table and you have to be reasonable to work out those 98% of cases. But I think another thing that you look at in my history as a prosecutor is what's been my focus. Has it just been to lock people up and throw away the key, or has it been to ensure fairness in the system? And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a long history of being a prosecutor that has pursued fairness in the system. In 2009, when Brett Ligon took office, we instituted an open file policy, which was not required by law at the time, which allowed the defense attorneys to come into our office. We set aside a copier that they provided, and they could make a copy of everything that the law allowed them to copy out of our file. That wasn't required by the law. And then 2 sessions ago, when the legislature was in session and they were struggling with some issues involving wrongful conviction, I was on the prosecutorial working group that helped them draft the Michael Morton Act, which significantly overhauled the criminal justice system and basically mandated an open file policy, like we had instituted in 2009. And if you look at that law and you look at the open file agreement that we had in place back in late 2009 at the district attorney's office, there's a lot of language in that agreement that's identical. And that's because I participated and I contributed a lot to that fairness. So that's why I can be a fair and impartial judge. Thank you.
Mr. Holly? And after Mr. Holly is done, if the next questioner will be ready, it'll be Mary Brown.
So 9th is dedicated to criminal law, and criminal law is anything but simple.
Could you hold the mic a little closer
Yes,
so
sir.
the audience can hear the question?
Since the 9th is dedicated to criminal law, and criminal law can be very complex, how important is it to have substantial experience in criminal law to do this job, district court judge?
Ms. Bim, you get to start this panel.
Thank you. I think it's critically important that the judge of the 9th District Court have substantial experience in criminal law. And not just because of the Code of Criminal Procedure and the Penal Code, but there are a number of different areas of the law that would relate to when a judge might hear, when a judge might make a decision. For instance, most things that affect that affect parole eligibility are not in the Code of Criminal Procedure. They're actually in the Texas Government Code. There's a lot of different issues that are interwoven within many different statutes that if you haven't had a substantial portion of your practice in criminal law, you would definitely be behind the 8 ball. And I'd like to say that board specialization has been an issue in this race. How many of you know how many judges in Montgomery County are board certified? Does anyone know? There's 14 judges in Montgomery County. 3 of the 4 are board certified. One of them is Judge Kelly Case, the current judge of the 9th District Court. So I think that we can all agree that board certification is not necessarily an indicator of whether someone is going to fairly and impartially follow the law and necessarily do the right thing in every case. So what you really have to look at is someone's experience, not only the breadth of their experience, but the depth of their experience in criminal law. And I have tried more criminal cases than both of my opponents combined in the last 5 years. One of my opponents has never tried a criminal case to verdict, and the other one has been primarily an administrator since he started here at the district attorney's office. And the bulk of my practice for the last 12 years has been a trial attorney in Montgomery County and in the 13 other counties in which I have practiced criminal law for the last 12 years. And so that makes my experience unique, and it makes me better qualified to serve as judge of the 9th District Court.
Well, I think when you're looking at a court that is a full-time felony criminal court, you need a full-time felony criminal practitioner. And yes, one of my jobs as the first assistant district attorney is to handle some of the administrative responsibilities of our office. But I've also tried some of the most serious cases that have come before juries in the state of Texas over my 20-year career. I've tried multiple capital murder cases. I've tried cases where people were trying to hire hitmen to kill public officials. I get called to other counties to help them out when an elected DA in Waco somebody was trying to kill him. So when the game is on the line and they need somebody who's an expert in criminal law, not only do I try those cases here in Montgomery County, but I'm often called upon to be a special prosecutor in other counties to handle that as well. And not only have I been a trial practitioner and have I tried those serious cases, and I'm the only one up here today who's tried a capital murder case. I'm the only one up here today who's tried multiple felony criminal child abuse cases. I have over 100 felony criminal trials, and that's more than both of my opponents combined have ever had. That's an extensive amount of experience in criminal law, ladies and gentlemen. There is nothing that is going to come before me that I have not seen. There is not a case that is going to be tried in that court that I have not handled complex litigation on, including death penalty capital murder cases. And that's not something that either of my opponents have dealt with. Mr. Yalik is board certified, but he's board certified in consumer law. And I hope one of these days I can support him when he runs for a civil bench. But this is a full-time felony criminal bench. And you need a full-time felony criminal practitioner who's seen everything, tried everything, handled everything, and handled it well. And I appreciate your support.
You know, there actually is a problem with the question itself, and I want to back up for a minute. You know, especially when people run as conservatives and they run for the Republican primary nomination, they say they're judges who want to follow the law. Well, if you are the winner and you become the judge of the 9th District Court, the first decision you're going to have to make is whether you're going to follow the law. And the law is very clear in Texas, and that is, this is supposed to be a general jurisdiction court that's determined by the legislature. The legislature has the sole authority to make that determination. And so if you're going to follow the law, you need to make this general jurisdiction. So what I've said that I'm going to do is that I will keep the number of criminal cases that are coming into that court the same as it is. But I will also handle a civil and family docket in order to alleviate some of the docket problems of the other courts. Now, working 50 hours a week and making it very clear that I'm going to move cases, I will be able to handle those cases and move the docket. And I want to say something. You know, I am an experienced attorney. I've been an attorney for now over a quarter of a century, which is hard for me to even believe. And, you know, we have seen in this county over many years wonderful judges who never practiced criminal law specifically and tried criminal cases, went on the bench and were terrific criminal district judges. John Martin, Mike Mays, who is currently the 410th District Court, is a fabulous judge in criminal cases. There are many other judges that I could give you examples of who go from being wonderful attorneys to being wonderful judges. So the issue is this a person who will follow the law? Are they familiar with the Code of Criminal Procedure? Do they know the rules of evidence and procedure? Thanks.
Mary Brown?
I would like to know three things. Number one, your age. Number two, the town you live in. And number three, your personal stance on capital punishment.
And we'll start with Mr. Grant.
That's easy. This is not going to take 2 minutes. I don't know how to stretch this out. I'm 45 years old. I currently live in Montgomery. I live north on 149, just south of the National Forest, which is a great area. I'm originally a city boy. I didn't think I was going to like it, but I moved out there into the country and I love it. It's nice out there in the peace and the quiet. So that's where I live in Montgomery, and that's where I attend church at the Fellowship of Montgomery Church off of 149 as well. What's my stance on capital punishment? I can follow the law when it comes to capital punishment, and I think that's really all we're permitted to say. Whether or not we can follow the law or whether we can't follow the law. And I could follow the law as it pertains to capital punishment in the state of Texas.
Mr. Yalek?
Mary, I'm 54 years old. The town that I live in, at least by some people's standards, is called the Woodlands. It's actually an unincorporated part of Montgomery County. And as far as capital punishment, I certainly have no problem with capital punishment. I support the provisions of the Republican Party platform, which are very clearly in favor of capital punishment when the law calls for it and when a jury has made a determination that capital punishment is the appropriate sentence. So I certainly will follow the law with respect to capital punishment.
I'm 37 years old. My husband Blake, who's over there, would very gladly tell you that I'm nearly 38 because he likes to tease me about getting older. We live in Magnolia with our two wonderful children. Whenever I say we live in Magnolia, there's kind of two Magnolias, right? There's the Magnolia at 2978 and 1488, which is close to where we live. And then there is the Magnolia that is back at 1774. So we live in the Magnolia that's closer to the Woodlands. And then I will follow the law regarding capital punishment, period, the end.
Our next questioner will be Jim Jenkins. And after Jim's question, if John Wirtz will be ready with his question.
As judge, will you perform same-sex marriage?
I think it's Eric, I think it's your turn.